started with the presentation. So this will be recorded. Hoping to put this up on YouTube or somewhere for people to access later. A PDF of this presentation will be emailed to participants after we complete this. As you all can see, everyone is automatically muted. So as we're going through the presentation, we request that you place any questions or any items for discussion in the chat box. We will make sure that your question is addressed prior to moving on to the next slide. If there is any additional follow-up questions, we can unmute you so that you can ask any clarifying questions. And we're also going to have just a very brief poll for the last few minutes of the training. So just 5 questions, so it'll be pretty quick. But we do ask that you take the time to complete that poll so that we can continue to develop and refine these trainings for the foreseeable future. So today we're going to have, you go to the next slide. So today we have our presentation, Starting Your System for Success by Lily Wang and Jennifer Muse. They are both licensed occupational therapists. Jennifer has been an OT since 1994. She worked within a clinic focusing on sensory integration for more than 10 years with Wake County Public Schools. And then she completed her master's degree in social work last year, and then she joined our START team in June of 2020. And she added social work to her repertoire just to expand the amount of support that she could provide to our population and interventions that she could provide to the folks that we serve. And Lily graduated from UNC in 2013 with her degree for occupational therapy. She has spent several years working with students in the Chapel Hill Carborough School. And she enjoys working with children and adults with IDD, and she joined our team as our occupational therapist consultant in 2018. So I will turn it over to Lily and Jennifer to go ahead and get started.
Awesome, thank you, Brittany. All right, so today we are so excited to have you guys here with us. We've been looking forward to this for a while now. Jennifer and I have been putting this presentation together for a few months, and we just wanted to go do a brief overview with you all about a few of the goals that we have today. We're welcome to any questions or comments throughout this process. I know this is a little bit unusual for all of us that we're on a computer. We're not able to interact in person and be together. But we're so glad that you guys were able to carve out a little bit of time to join us today, and hope we can help you learn a few new things. So we're hoping today to talk about the 8 different senses that we all have, to discuss what exactly is sensory processing. What do we mean when we talk about sensory processing and sensory differences? What are some signs of being under-responsive to sensory stimuli, and what are some signs of being over-responsive to sensory stimuli? We are going to talk about a really great program called Autism Level Up and discuss a few of their energy regulation tools as ideas and options for helping the individuals that we serve at home. These tools are pretty simple and accessible. And so our goal today was really to bring you guys some materials that you could implement easily in your own spaces. And we're going to discuss a couple of other activities for finding out what exactly is a just right state at home and how do we help individuals get into that state. So I am going to hand things over now to Jennifer, and she is going to take it away.
Hello, so I'm Jennifer, and I'm so happy that you have all decided to join us for our conversation today. As Lily said, we're very excited to share some information and have some discussion as well. So as Lily and I were putting together the presentation, we felt that taking a moment to pause and talk about language would be meaningful before we jumped into the content of sensory systems, sensory processing, and strategies. And so there are really 2 schools of thought on language, especially in the disability community. The first came about in the late 80s, and that's called people first language, and that came about the same time as a lot of the legislation around disability access, mainstreaming, and whatnot. And people first language really puts the person before the disability when a person is speaking. So an example would be my friend with autism or my friend with depression. And that really describes, the thought behind that is that it describes what the person, who the person is and what they have, but the person comes first before the disability. The second school of thought is the identity first language, and that is really popular right now, especially with self-advocates in the autism population. And that emphasizes that the disability is a positive cultural identifier for the person, and that it's not something to put second, it's just a part of who they are, which actually is part of their strength in this world. And so an example of that would be my autistic friend. And so there is the reversal of the words. And so you will notice as Lily and I go through our presentation that we use both styles interchangeably. And we also recognize that people do have their own individual preferences and how they are referred to, and that really the overall goal is to recognize, affirm, and validate each person's identity and personhood. And we wanted to not only acknowledge how we would be using the language in our presentation, but also so that people who are attending today might also think about how they are referring to people and ask personal preferences as they go forward. So before we move on, are there any questions on that?
I don't see any questions in the chat. And we're good to go.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about the 8 senses, and I will say that as we go through this presentation, any part of it could easily be a day of presentation in itself. So today's goal is really an overview and an introduction that can go much deeper if you do have interest in exploring more information. So we're going to start by talking about the 8 senses, and most people are familiar with 5 senses. In elementary school, they're still teaching that we have 5 senses. In the world of sensory processing, we really look at there being 8 senses. And so the 5 that most of you are probably familiar with are touch, sound, sight, taste, and smell. And I put the clinical terms next to them as well. So touch is known as the tactile system, sound is the auditory system, sight is the visual system, taste is gustatory, and smell is olfactory, okay? And then moving into the 3 senses that you may not be as familiar with, we have interoception, proprioception, and the vestibular system. Interoception is how we get information from inside of our body to process. And that information might be things like knowing that you're hungry or knowing that you're thirsty. It's information that comes from inside and to give you an awareness of what's going on in your body. Proprioception is really the awareness of your own body and space, and that comes through information from your joints and muscles as you go through your day and your activities. Vestibular really looks at your processing of movement in this world and contributes to balance and your position in space against gravity especially. So I will pause for questions, and then Lily, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to take a moment just to do an activity to really think about what sensory preferences, likes or dislikes we may all have. And while we can't do this really in discussion format, we're still going to take a moment because I think it'll help the conversation going forward. So just jot down some of your own sensory preferences, likes or dislikes. And an example, which is not an example from me, is I don't like strong smells, I don't like the sound of chewing, and I like really heavy blankets. So go ahead and do that just for a moment.
That's definitely a me characteristic. And if anyone feels compelled to send that in to Brittany too, we're happy to share some of the things we're hearing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. As we wrap up, if people want to put any of their examples into the chat box, I think it will be helpful and interesting for everyone to see the variety of what people like and dislike, and also the similarities of what people might like and dislike. All right, so wrap that up, and please put some of your preferences down in the chat box. And Lily, if you want to move forward on the slide.
I see that Meredith has said that she does not like the sound of people chewing. Kristen, I hope I'm saying your name right, Kristen Walker mentioned they don't like flashing lights. Jennifer said that they don't like soft breathable fabric. They prefer soft breathable fabric, sorry. And they don't like itchy or, sorry, itchy fabric. So you have some people mentioning not liking repetitive tapping or noises like that, preferring sweet smells, not enjoying multiple conversations happening at once. That can be overwhelming to some folks as well. A dislike of loud music, and a preference for heavy blankets. Let's see. I have someone was mentioned that they don't like touching frozen foods or hard ice cream. Quite a few folks saying they like the feeling of weighted blankets. Someone said that they do not like the tips of their fingers being touched. That's an interesting one. Let's see, quite a few people do not like the sound of chewing, some food texture sensitivities, a lot of preference for those weighted blankets and fuzzy sensations to help them to feel calmer or more regulated. So thank you everyone for kind of sharing that, because it sounds like we have a lot of similarities or themes going on in the chat.
And Brittany, is everyone able to see the chat or no?
I think everyone should be able to see each other
Okay.
in the chat box.
So feel free to keep sharing, everyone, and we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you for sharing. I think that will be helpful to you and to others as we go forward. As you can see, there's a wide range of what people like and dislike. Some people like or dislike the same thing, and it runs across sensory systems, as you can see. So that's what we're going to talk about right now, which is very important to note that all humans have sensory features. Okay, we all have our likes, we all have our dislikes, we all have the things that we do to support us towards optimal function, right? So if you have a big day, there might be sensory supports you put in place or things that you avoid to help you be in your best place to perform, whether you're performing in a professional basketball game or whether it's supposed to be a quiet day of test taking. And so what is tricky and important is to know where to draw the line between where those sensory features might be and when it turns into a sensory challenge for somebody, okay? And really what differentiates it is when that sensory seeking or sensory avoiding influences and changes behavior or mood, function, ability to express yourself, your comfort level in your environment, and your ability to engage, not only with other people, but with the environment as well, and with tasks that are set before you. And so that's really where the difference is between the sensory features and sensory challenges that might need more understanding or more support or even intervention or change. And so individuals can have challenges both within sensory systems and across sensory systems, so that in the sensory system of touch, for example, I don't like being in crowds because there's a lot of light touch bumping up against me, and that really might cause me, you know, to feel stressed out and to lose a little bit of function as I want. But I also would take a massage any day of the week, so that heavy, predictable, kind of firmer touch works for me. So within the same sensory system, you can have differences. And then across sensory systems also, you know, that happens. So somebody can be over responsive to touch, but then under responsive to movement, for example. So let's pause for questions on what we talked about there. Otherwise, we can move on to the next slide.
Not seeing any.
Okay. Great. So we're going to talk about examples of sensory over-responsivity, and then we're going to talk about examples of sensory under-responsivity. And so these are the places where if we have crossed that line from sensory feature to sensory challenge, we might see some of these attributes. And I chose this picture because it's, and for those who are joining by phone, there's a picture of 4 children smiling, playing outside with bubbles. They're seated very close together. And, you know, everybody seems to be having a good time. So I chose this picture because somebody with sensory over-responsivity might not be having such a joyful time. If they were oversensitive to touch and the other friends were bumping into them continuously, that might be cause for escalation. There might be unexpected loud noises as one of the kids laughs or shrieks in delight, and that might cause somebody not to be feeling as well in that moment. There might be a breeze, the bubbles might be scented. So again, there's a lot of things going on in this picture, and these 4 children look delighted. However, somebody with over-responsivity might not be having such a good time. So going through the different sensory systems and what might happen if there's over-responsivity. So in the touch system, somebody who's over-responsive to touch might avoid sticky, gooey, messy play. They might not like being barefoot in the sand on the beach. That it's too much information coming into their system to handle well. In the auditory system, they may get extremely disorganized in noisy environments. Unexpected fire alarms or the air brakes on a bus or a truck going by might be too much to tip them over into escalation. In the visual system, they may be uncomfortable in the sun unless they're wearing sunglasses. They may be easily distracted by busy environments. And I think of students in school where they have a lot of posters, visual, color, words, assignments. There's a lot visually going on sometimes in classrooms. And for a child with over-responsivity in the visual system, that can lead to overwhelm and decreased function. In the area of taste, they may have a very limited food repertoire, and I've been doing this for a long time. We used to call it the white diet. I don't know if it's called that anymore, but this might be people that only eat chicken nuggets, French fries, mashed potatoes, bread, and pasta, right? Not a whole lot of variety in terms of color, texture, taste, very, very simple. Okay, and that might be somebody who's over-responsive to taste. Anything beyond that is too much, causes stress, escalation. The olfactory system, somebody who's sensitive to smells might run from smells such as dinner cooking. They might be sensitive to scented lotions and perfumes. I actually worked with a little girl at one point that was so sensitive to the smell of cut grass that whenever she would smell that, she would vomit immediately. And so you can imagine how that really impacted her function in the world. Being outside, being on the playground with friends, driving in the car, being in her home, you know. So again, over-responsivity can happen in any of the sensory systems. Interoception is that new sense that we talked about with the sensation that comes from within your body, and that might be somebody who notices stomach aches a lot. You know, just a little discomfort may feel very large to them because they're over-responsive to the sensation. Somebody over-responsive may sense their own heart beating. They may hear their own heart beating. They may sense or hear their own blood flowing through their arteries and veins. And you can imagine how distracting that could be while you're trying to attend to other activities in your daily life. Proprioception, somebody over-responsive to that may not like to feel pressures on their feet and legs. They may refuse to jump, hop, and skip. The information coming from their muscles and joints might be just too much to process with input. And then in the vestibular system, an individual may not like to climb or swing or have their feet off the ground. Somebody over-responsive to movement probably doesn't like roller coasters, may actually get nauseous in the car or just watching other people swinging on the swings. So let's stop for questions before moving on to under responsivity? Otherwise, Lily, you can go forward. Thank you. Okay. And if I'm going too fast or slow, you can all comment on that as well. So we're going to go through the different sensory systems in terms of under responsivity. So if it takes too much, if you're under responsive, it takes more of the information for it to register with you. So in terms of the touch system, someone with under responsivity may not notice if they get hurt or bumped, and they may be under responsive to pain, which is really important with the individuals that we care for and that we provide for. We need to know if they're not going to recognize if they've been hurt, if they have a cut on their arm and they're not going to notice it because they're under responsive to touch. You know, those are real safety issues. In terms of the auditory system, somebody under responsive to auditory may not respond to their name being called. They might hum while working on a task, play music, TV, video games, extremely loud. Again, it takes more information for it to register. So they may seek that information through that sensory channel. In terms of the visual system, they may lose their place when reading. They may complain of their eyes being tired. And these may be the individuals that thrive in those busy visual environments. They may need a lot of visual stimulation around them to be able to keep focus on what they're supposed to be doing. The taste system, these individuals may not notice or care if foods are spicy or bland, hot or cold. And again, that for those of us that work and care for these individuals, that's important information if somebody's going to drink a scalding hot liquid or eat a scalding hot food because they don't have the registration within that system to recognize quickly enough that it's not a safe behavior. In terms of the olfactory system, they may not notice strong or unpleasant odors. And functionally, this is really important because they may not smell, they might not register the smell of smoke in the air or the smell of something burning in the kitchen to know to go turn off the stove. They also may not be able to identify their own body odor, so they may need reminder to use deodorant or take a shower. You know, this is all part of the sensory registration for that person. In terms of interoception, if they're under responsive, they might not be aware when they have to use the restroom. They may not know when they're hungry or thirsty. And so again, in terms of dehydration and having the information from your body of whether you're constipated or you need to drink or you need to eat is super important in the population that we're speaking of. Under responsivity in the proprioceptive system, these might be the individuals that kind of slump in their chair. They lean on the wall. They might lean into people when they're talking to them, lean on the desk. They kind of have weak muscles. They may have lower stamina. They just don't get as much muscle and joint activation naturally. And then in terms of the vestibular area, a person with under responsivity may not voluntarily choose to play on playground equipment. They may prefer sedentary tasks. And because they need more, again, to process the information, these may be the people also that get on a swing and spin and spin and spin and spin and spin and spin because they need so much more of the input for it to be registered, for it to have meaning to them as they're processing it.
Got lots of comments, Jen.
Okay.
Can you see the chat?
I can probably open it. I don't have it.
Okay. It took me a little bit to figure it out. So Jennifer asked if under responsive sometimes is referred to as sensory seeking.
Yes, I would agree with that. And so I've been doing this for a long time and the wording has changed. So the over-responsive used to be called defensiveness as well. Some of you may have heard those terms. Sensory seeking is often when they're under-responsive, they're seeking that sensory information through the channel. And then sensory avoiding is often those that are over-responsive. So it's too much information coming in, so they'll tend to avoid those things. That's a really good question. There's a lot of words that mean the same.
Casey said under responsive is often called high tolerance to pain, for example. So yes, high tolerance to pain is an example of being under responsive. Philip will get you the name of the YouTube channel. Eileen said that she used to know a guy who always had his music, TV, and video games going at the same time. Maybe a little under responsive.
Maybe a little bit. But if he was able to focus during that, then maybe that supported him as well.
Definitely. And Gwendolyn said, I've heard several people say they can't sleep without the television on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those are all very good examples.
Those are all very, very good examples. And again, just like you all shared your own preferences, it really runs a huge range of what this can look like for under responsivity and over responsivity. These are just some examples, and thank you all for sharing. That's helpful to the discussion.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So I'm actually going to go through 2 slides before pausing for questions because it's all on the same topic. So we just wanted to share that there are, so how to tease out if an individual has sensory features or sensory challenges or problems. And so we wanted to let you know that there are evaluation tools out there, both standardized and non-standardized. I'm not going to go through the tests right here, but just so that you know that they exist. Excuse me. And I will say that some of the tools are not normed for individuals with diagnoses of autism and or ADHD. And so you can get skewed results for individuals that have some of the standardized tests used with those. The standardized tests, it's very important that they're administered by someone who has master's level education in some of the fields that work with sensory processing, therapy, social work, speech language pathology, counseling, psychology, in a field where it's really the studies are related and they use the tools. And this slide, Lily.
Oh, Jennifer, I think that you were breaking up a little bit towards the end. Do you think you could repeat the last thing that you said?
Oh, I was just saying that, can you hear, is it better now?
Yeah, good.
Okay. I was just saying that it's important that the person using the standardized tools is somebody that has a master's level education in one of the fields that really has some expertise in sensory processing, which might include the field of occupational therapy, speech language therapy, counseling, social work, psychology. And that's not only so that they're trained in the use of the standardized evaluation tools, the administration, but also so that they're able to accurately interpret the results. And in sensory processing, that's the key thing, really, is the interpretation of the results. What are features, what are problems, and then from that, you can build strategies to address them. And then if you flip the slide, Lily, in terms of non-standardized screening tools, there are questionnaires, there's interview formats, and there's clinical and environmental observation. And for someone that has training and experience in the field of sensory processing, clinical and environmental observation can sometimes be even more powerful than the standardized tools, which give you numbers and results. So people can be very trained in teasing out what an individual is seeking, what they're avoiding. Is it a feature? Is it a problem? Is it beneficial? Or is it getting in the way of overall function? And if we were all sitting in a room or a video was on, I could see some of the sensory tools that all of you are using to focus on this presentation right now. You might be eating crunchy foods, you might be chewing on your pencil, you might be playing with your hair, you might be shaking your foot, your knee might be going up and down, you might be kind of moving around in your chair, some of you might be standing up and walking around, drinking hot drinks, drinking icy drinks through a straw. Those are all things that we use to support our function in our daily activities. And the individuals that we work with have sensory features as well. And some of them have sensory challenges. And so just don't be afraid if a professional suggests using the clinical and observation instead of the standardized testing, because some of that information can be just as, if not more, valuable as well. So let's do questions, and then we're going to move on to Lily, who will start talking about some of the strategies for treatment.
Yeah. So Jennifer asked if school OTs and PTs are able to address these things.
For the most part, they should have had the training, yes. And if the specific occupational therapist or physical therapist in the school does not have the training or the tools to use it, there is usually someone within the county that does, that they could call in to do such an assessment.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say, I'd add that you will likely see that kind of evaluation in the schools more often from OT than physical therapy. And that's also a great place to see a lot of environmental and clinical observation used as part of that assessment tool, in addition to some of the standardized tests, because things like IEPs and getting documentation often require hard numbers. So it's a nice opportunity to kind of get a balance of different evaluation metrics.
Absolutely. And I will say in the school systems that it, whatever they're assessing for needs to usually affect educational and academic performance for them to assess those pieces, kind of as a side note.
Yeah.
Any other questions, or I'll pass it to you, Lily?
All right. I'm not seeing anything popped up. I have the chat open on my window, as well as the view of us, as well as the PowerPoint. So if I missed something, or if I'm taking a moment to read things, that's what's up. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Jennifer, that was awesome. Thank you so much for all of that information. I think that it's a lot to hear, and it's a lot to try and process for ourselves. We all know we have sensory differences. We have different sensory preferences, and a lot of times the individuals we work with have those things going on as well. And sometimes it goes beyond just a preference or a difference, and it goes into a challenge or a sensory processing disorder or a feature of their intellectual disability. We might even see it present as a feature of their mental health challenges. Sometimes when your body can't regulate itself, or if you are experiencing periods of high anxiety, you might demonstrate those things in your sensory output or input. So what do we do? We've got all this information. That's cool. Now we understand a little bit. What are we going to do about it? So we're going to talk a little bit about some treatment strategies, and hopefully end with some tools that you all can use in your work environments and in your home environments, or for yourself. So for treatment strategies in general, I think that one of the things that we end up seeing happen a lot is environmental adaptation. So that's changing the physical environment around you to accommodate for a sensory difference. That's like turning off the lights before you go into a room if you have a visual sensitivity. It's like removing scented candles from a space, or not allowing scented candles in a space. You actually see that, we see that a lot in the schools. It was something that I argued for often, was that teachers wouldn't be allowed to use things like scented candles or sprays in the room, because you never really know who that's affecting. And those environmental adaptations in the home can be as easy or as simple as changing the types of light bulbs in the house. Bringing down the wattage, increasing the wattage in certain places. If it's a place that you know doesn't have a lot of light or a lot of natural light, and you know that the person focuses better, or they need to be focused for an activity, maybe you're increasing the light there, or changing the type of light that's presented. Coaching is a great way, and one of the things that I think probably many of us do. Teachers do coaching, caregivers do coaching, support people give coaching, and that would be to help individuals self-identify and come up with coping strategies for those sensory differences. Specific therapy methods come into play here. you'll hear people talk about sensory integration therapy, which is a very specific approach to trying to integrate sensory differences into a person's being. So that's where you see, or what you see a lot of happening in big therapy gyms. So if you've ever been to a private therapy gym or an occupational therapy session in a clinic, a lot of times they'll do big swinging and bouncing and climbing through tunnels and through squeezy machines. And those are things that can help people recenter their bodies in a way that grounds them or helps them re-regulate their activity level. One of the caveats to that, I think, that is not quite as helpful at times for those of us who are working in the home is that it can often require like large tools and spaces that we don't necessarily have access to at home. Some other strategies we come across are things like teaching self-awareness, helping individuals identify their own accommodations, or helping advocate or promote accommodations in the classroom setting or in a day setting, and helping individuals identify stress avoidance techniques. So we know that we're going to the grocery store tomorrow. Mom has got to get some milk. It's not a question. You're not allowed to stay home alone. You have to go to the grocery store with me. I know that going to the grocery store really stresses you out. So let's talk about something we can do before we go to the grocery store tomorrow. Would you like to take your headphones with your favorite song playing, or would you like to take your headphones with an audiobook playing during the time at the grocery store? So giving an individual some examples ahead of time and planning out some of those stressful activities. You've taught self-awareness. They know they're going to be stressed out at the grocery store, and then you're going to come in with an accommodation, giving a headphone, giving, you know, something that helps minimize that stressor, and you're going to help teach that stress avoidance technique. Now, you know that when you go into these big crowded places, you know how to help yourself feel a little more centered by listening to this audiobook or by wearing your sunglasses into the grocery store. So we see a lot of pre and post behavior rating scales as well in these treatments. And that can be most useful, I think, for those of us who are really helping create this change or helping promote this, these strategies for individuals. Documentation obviously is something that can get really overwhelming, but it's also something that can give us concrete information. And so when we're really teasing out these differences, like Jennifer said, it takes trial and error, and it can take trying 3 different strategies that you thought would be perfect and realizing like, ooh, this guy does not like to swing. He pukes every time. Or like this guy over here, like this friend, not interested in doing 10 jumping jacks. But this friend over here is really very skilled at dancing and gets a lot out of it. And I noticed after they danced that like, man, they really calmed down and focused on that homework assignment. So those are some of the rating skills or documentation that we might keep as support people. And in those settings, in those contexts, having explicit treatment goals, having very targeted things that you're trying to accomplish or are trying to address can really help people stay on track. We like to see progress, and we like to see change, and we like to see people feel more supported. And so if we know that, you know, John has a goal to increase their tolerance for foods that are crunchy, and we're sitting with him at a day program on Tuesday, and he opened those Doritos and John ate a Dorito at lunch, we could say, hey, that is a step in a different direction. That is great. We've made some progress here. And I think that can help keep us as support people motivated to keep helping tease out some of these things, and also help keep the individuals we're working with encouraged. So creating a sensory diet and our self-calming routine, we're going to go on to next, but is the other thing I think probably most often asked for or referenced. It's the request that I get most often from a lot of our start consultations is we need something at home. We need something during the day. How do we prevent this person from escalating to the point where we cannot help them. I wish that I had an easy answer for that, but hopefully some of these strategies will contribute to answering some of those questions. I'm going to take a second. We got a couple of big questions. Any recommendations for advocating with OTs at school for these things affecting school, even if it's not necessarily read that way by teachers? That's a really tricky one. And I think that's where getting the team on board is really crucial. Personally, I struggled with that in the school system as an OT who was very, I don't think that you can pay attention or be a student engaged in academics if your sensory system is not regulated, if your personhood is not validated, if you are not feeling secure. And so my best advice is to try and help them understand and link those things. So like I could say, like, Eileen is really not able to pay attention during your literacy lesson because she needs to move her body. And if she doesn't move her body, she's not going to be able to pay attention. And if she's not paying attention, she's not going to learn to read. So helping tie in what you're seeing as a physical need or as a sensory need to link it to a specific academic thing. I think there's also the argument that can be made that school is not just about learning academics. It's about learning how to interact with other people. It's about learning how to be in loud environments and participate in new things, and that supporting a person's sensory system does help that. Laurel asked, could it be argued with an IEP team that a person who is under or over responsive in some of these areas has difficulty paying attention in class, and OT goals should be geared toward improving, reducing responsiveness rather than the typical holding a pencil ideas around school-based OT? Yes. The short answer, yes, that definitely can be argued. And I think that, again, it goes back to the last question of, is it something that we can support in the schools? And the answer is that it should be something that we support in the schools. Thankfully, outside of pandemic life where school is on the computer, it is something that a lot of teachers were getting more into during my time in the schools, at least in the elementary level, of things like having classrooms with a variety of seating accommodations, providing these accommodations for all kids. And I think that that is one of the biggest takeaways we can have for teachers, is that by providing support and accommodations, you're helping all students learn in the way that's best for them. That we all talked about, like we all gave examples, we all have different preferences, and it's important for us to be able to identify those and to share them. And we might have a child who doesn't have a label or a diagnosis who ends up benefiting just as much as our kid who has it written into his IEP. Sensory considerations, sorry?
Yeah, can I just jump in with one additional thing on that?
Please
so
do.
I just want to mention that because I worked in a practice that was geared towards sensory integration and then started working in the school. So I had the background, but because the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction goals are really needed to be written in a way on an IEP that are functional and academic and educationally relevant. And so even if an occupational therapist is working on helping someone be, have better responsivity to a certain sensory input, the goal is not going to necessarily be that they be more responsive to that input. The goal is more likely to be that they're able to focus for 5 minutes at a time, or whatever the functional behavior was that sensory difference was causing. So just in terms of how goals are written in IEPs, goals aren't really written for sensory progress. They're really written for functional progress, and then the sensory supports come underneath that.
Yes, totally. That's a great point. That's a very good
clarify.
clarification. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Casey said sensory considerations more in schools as well as day programs and supported employment would be so wonderful. And that's our hope, actually, Casey, is that with this information that we can help empower all staff or support people to be providing that additional support. is NC START available as specialized consultative consultants for innovations for OT sensory needs? Not at this time.
And I did just reply in the chat. So we do offer some modified consultations to folks who are not currently being served by START. So I did put my email address in the chat if you want to contact me for some further information about that.
Okay, y'all, we've got a bit more to cover. I'm gonna try and speed myself up a little bit. Creating self-calming routines. So the biggest points here are that when we are creating a self-calming routine for someone, we are going to assess them when they are relaxed and happy. We are not going to try and implement a self-calming routine or make a big change to a behavior when they are escalated, when they are having a rough moment. Because we all know that when our bodies escalate, we understand less. We operate on a lower level. And I think that's true for all people, especially folks with intellectual disabilities, people who might have some cognitive delays in processing information, trying to add on information when they're feeling stressed out or frustrated or upset is not going to be a particularly helpful moment. So when we are trying to identify activities that are going to be useful for that individual, we want to make sure that they're calm. Maybe we work on deep breathing activities. Maybe we notice that they love to squeeze their stuffed animals, or they've constantly got this ball with them, that they're always on the move, that they are really, really, really interested in Legos. And how can we use those interests? How can we support the person's own natural tendencies to self-regulate and help them shape those into activities that keep them regulated during moments of high stress? So we take activities that are easy and appear to be calming, and we might arrange them in a variation or a list, a visual schedule. If it's somebody that we feel like they're in a day program and they get to their day program and we say, hey, like, you know, like, I think this is a great time. We're going to go through your calming activities. We're going to start today and every day by doing your walk around the building and your 2 minutes of deep breathing, or, you know, whatever those activities that you've identified are, building those in throughout the day. Once that routine is put together, you want to continue to practice it while they're calm. You're going to keep practicing it, and you're going to try and use it during the moments before a meltdown. So when you first start seeing someone escalate into that place of like, I just cannot control myself, when you see those first signs, that is the time to present them with their calming routines. And there's a link below with a little bit more information and a little bit more examples of specific strategies. And we'll talk through a few more of those things as well as we continue on. So my new favorite thing, I think that Brittany and Jen are probably like, Lily talks about all the time. I'm really excited about it, and I hope that you guys will be too after we talk about it together. Autism Level Up, and this is a point I want to make too, is I'm going to be referencing Autism Level Up a lot in the next few slides. This is a really wonderful organization that's come together to really promote the advocacy and inclusion of autistic voices, and I have just been very impressed with their knowledge and information. But I also think that it's stuff that we can generalize to a lot of the populations we serve. So I don't want you to be discouraged if you're thinking like, oh, well, the people I'm working with don't have autism. What does this have to do with them? I think that a lot of times what we see is that folks with autism, they learn and think differently than neurotypical people. But I think that can be true as well for folks with intellectual disabilities and folks with mental health challenges. So bear with me. I'm going to talk about a fair amount about autism, but I really think that these things are things that can be applied across the board. So Autism Level Up is a program that was created by Jacqueline Fadee, who is an autism self-advocate and PhD, and sorry, now I've blocked my own screen and my own notes. And Amy Laurent, who's a child psychologist and registered pediatric occupational therapist. They are a team working together to help create specific strategies to support autistic individuals and to promote the inclusion and acceptance of neurodiverse individuals in our community. One of the big things that I really value about this program is that it's a very strengths-based approach to self-regulation. It's really looking at trying to figure out how can we use the things that people already do, instead of saying, you know, I see that you are flapping your hands around all day during your class. Like, why are you sitting there? The teacher's reading, you're flapping your hands. Instead of getting them to change their behavior so that they present more neurotypical, how can we help people use those strengths that they have and acknowledge them as strengths to advocate for themselves and be able to share with others what it is they're gaining from these activities, and how can we encourage them to use them in a way that feels sustainable and also really helpful in different settings. So one of the things we're going to talk a lot about in terms of specific ways to really affect change or help identify some of these characteristics is the energy versus emotion debate. It's not really a debate. But we talk a lot about emotion. We talk a lot about teaching people emotion. We talk a lot about teaching people to identify their emotions. Well, if they can identify that they're angry, then we can help them be less angry, I think is the hope that we all have. But what we also know is that emotional regulation can be really hard. It can be really challenging. And it's not something that comes naturally or easy to everyone. So one of the things that can be a barrier there is the language in and of itself. Emotion can be a difficult concept. It can be hard for people to understand what we're talking about. When I say, I want you to identify happy, identify sad, identify angry, we're putting labels on these emotions that many of us understand as neurotypical individuals, but that folks whose brains operate differently than ours do might not be computing in the same way. So energy can sometimes be an easier way to conceptualize how your body is feeling. I can tell you if I'm like, whoo, shaky, like I just like, I need to move my body right now, or I can tell you if I cannot keep my eyes open. But being alert and shaky, I could be feeling happy. It could be that I'm really, really excited. I'm about to go to the mall with my best friend and I am so excited. Just kidding. I would be terrified because pandemic. So I could also be nervous and shaky because I'm about to give this big presentation and I don't know who these people are and it's been a while and it's all on Zoom. My energy level could be presenting differently even though I'm presenting, or my energy level could be presenting the same, even though I'm presenting different emotions, even though I'm feeling different emotions. So I like this program because it uses energy as a concept and removes the language barrier of emotions. So, sorry, I'm checking all right. The energy regulator tool is a specific tool that we're going to look at that presents 6 biobehavioral states. It's based on developmental theory. If you think back to little babies, like how do babies regulate themselves literally as newborns? They cry. They cry when they need a diaper change. They cry when they need food. They cry when they're tired. So there they are. They're presenting the same emotion. Aren't they always sad when they're crying? Like, but they're not. We know that because we work toward interpreting what it is their needs are. And that can be done too for folks with intellectual disabilities and for the folks that we work with. It is something that uses really neutral language. And I think that that language could be more easily understood. And it helps us ask a few really important questions. How much energy do I have right now? How much energy do I need to have for a specific activity? And how do I get to that optimal level of energy? So going to the playground, I'm going to play with my best friend, but I'm feeling pretty low. So if I'm going to play on a playground and I'm going to climb on the monkey bars and I'm going to swing on the swing, like I probably need to be a little bit more amped up. If I'm feeling really low, it's going to be hard for me to engage in the environment that I'm going into. So what can we do to prepare our bodies and prepare ourselves for that engagement in the new environment or that specific activity? That can be really different. If I need to sit down and take a test, like it's not a question, I have to get it done, but I am feeling crazy. I want to be outside on that playground right now. Like that's where I want to be. That's my energy level. I am amped up, ready to go. But I need to be cool, calm, and collected so that I can engage in this test. And what can we do to change that energy state and help someone meet where they need to be for that specific activity? So here is the energy regulator tool. And what you're seeing here is the original version with the kind of different faces of expressions, and on the left, the energy needed, the blue side, is where you would think about what is the match for the activity that we're doing. And on the right is my energy. Where am I? What am I going to be doing? This tool is really great because it's really easy to modify. It's really easy to individualize for the people that you're working with. You can change the wording. You could change the characters. On the next slide, we'll see some examples of that. But the idea being that you would follow it with a paper clip or with a clothespin or just 2 arrows, Velcro patches on the sides. And you'd have an arrow that would be for the energy that's needed for an activity and an arrow for the individual to be able to identify, this is where I am. And some of our individuals are not going to be able to identify what this is where I am right away. And that's where we come in and support people and say, hey, like I'm seeing in your body that you look like you're really starting to fidget. I'm seeing you rocking back and forth. I notice that you're shaking your hands right now and that you keep fidgeting your fingers together. It looks like you're amped up. I'm going to put your arrow over here on amped up. And it seems like maybe it would be a little more helpful if we were settled and calm, because it's really time to get this reading assignment done. So let's do XYZ activity. Let's see if we can get you there. So this is an example of ways you might individualize it. So maybe your individual loves Pokemon. They know everything about Pokemon. They think they are so cool. They know all the characteristics. They can tell you how each character evolves. Or they sit there and all they want to do is draw Pokemon. So you could take that level of interest. You could take that specific thing and adapt this. So Squirtle is the guy who is cool, calm, collected, ready, paying attention. But Pikachu, we know Pikachu is like full of electricity and they're definitely a little extra jittery. And just change those things to modify them so that they fit. I've seen for sure, I know that our START coaches, this is definitely one of their amazing skills, is they're so talented at individualizing for every person that they work with. I've seen everything from Pokemon to Disney princesses to Matchbox cars, just different ways that they really help meet our individuals where they are. And the thing is that gets buy-in. If somebody knows that they're interested, if you're using their strengths, then it gets them to buy in a little bit more. And over here, what you'll see on the other side is an example of what those arrows look like. So what you might be seeing here, like my energy is jumpy, I need it to be at a different state. You can move those arrows up and down, like I said before. And then they actually, what they did is they surveyed fifth graders, and they had fifth graders give them the language to accommodate or adapt this specific version. I really like it because it feels very relatable to me personally. I'm like, oh yeah, like hyper, over the top, that's the language I would use. Energetic, jumping, cool, yes, got it. Ready, paying attention. So to me, compared to the one before, it's just a little bit more layman's terms, for lack of a better word. So any specific thoughts or questions on that tool at the moment?
Hey, Lily, how would you all adapt this for individuals who may not use words to communicate?
That is such a good question. So somebody doesn't use words to communicate, and that is where we come in as support people. That's where someone might come in as their support during the day program, or maybe you're their coach, maybe you are their at-home support in their AFL or in a group home, or maybe you're a parent. This can be used, I think that's one of the great things about making it a tangible object, is that if they can move these arrows up and down themselves, it starts with a lot of modeling. It would have to start with a lot of modeling, with the support people helping them identify. And maybe they don't use words to communicate both in expressive language, and maybe they don't use words great in receptive language. They're not taking in the words that you're saying. So it might be a matter of like doing a lot of visual examples of, I see you shaking, and I see, like, we're going to stick this arrow here on Pikachu. Pikachu does a lot of shaking. And you could modify it both with pictures of what those actions might look like, or like definitely using that tangible aspect of it to model over and over and over. In the same ways that we do teach language skills by modeling, we would hope to do the same with this. Could photos of the individual work? Sure, absolutely. I don't think there's any reason. I mean, yeah, I think that's a great idea. So I've already addressed this a bit, but let's see, let me make sure. Yeah, so here, Brittany, as you were asking, support partners can help give feedback to individuals so they can begin self-identifying their own energy level. That's just a small piece of doing it with someone. I think my main point in most of these tools is it's really easy to look at them for someone who is speaking, or someone who communicates, who has a higher level of communication. It gets a little harder, and that's going to be the truth for all intervention strategies, I think, to really adapt them for those individuals that we work with who need a higher level of support. And that's where being their support person and having awareness of these tools can really be helpful, because if you're dedicated to help teasing some of these things out, it might be that you as the support person, you never even really get concrete feedback from them in terms of their communication, that like, I loved the squeezy ball, but what you notice is a pattern. You notice a pattern that I gave them the squeezy ball, they seemed like they were agitated, and then they calmed down. The next day, we tried it again, they seemed to really calm down. The next day, we tried it again, they seemed to calm down, but like maybe it wasn't quite right for that moment. And so you start noticing patterns, and these tools hopefully can give some concrete space to jot down notes, jot down observations, and start helping consider you know, exactly what those things are doing or what role those actions are playing for that individual. Yeah, so we've gone through this. The energy power pack brings us into the next step. So I know how to identify my energy level, but what do I do when I need to change my energy level? So it can help identify specific exercises and activities when an individual needs to power up or power down their energy level. The tool uses a strengths-based approach to support the ways that individuals already interact with the world and already self-regulate, and help promote intentional use of these strategies. So here you see that we will have individuals, you know, if our individual can tell us where they are, then we might be able to help them make some changes in their energy level. So I'm pretty tired. I knew that I needed to give this presentation, but I didn't sleep well last night. My kid woke up 3 times. My dog barked in the middle of the night, and I am really tired. I need to power up to be a little bit more animated, because these people are going to be so bored if they have to sit there and watch me yawn on Zoom again, like every other Zoom presentation. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go for a run this morning. It's going to amp me up. I know it's going to get my blood flowing. I know it's going to help me take some deep breaths, and it's going to help me center my body. And so later this afternoon, I'm going to need to calm down, because like all that adrenaline from giving a presentation got me really amped up. And I know that if I go back to hanging out with my kids that way, they're going to feed off my energy, and that's going to make my job harder. So before I go back to them, I need to power down. I need something different. So I'm going to take a quick break, take some deep breaths, try and center myself before I move back into that next activity. So this tool, these are just a few screenshots of the actual tool for the Power Pack, because they actually give examples of activities to do to power up: 3 levels, 2 levels, 1 level. No, none of these activities are working. And then they give examples of powering down: 3 levels, 2 levels, 1 level. And you'll see, like, these are easy things to do at home. Do some jumping jacks, touch your toes, take a break, go on a swing, go for a run, take a walk, do some stretching, eat something crunchy, eat something chewy, eat something that gives a lot of that input in your mouth. Take a break, give a hug. Some of those examples. A few other strategies, and this is one of the things that I really like, is that we know that a lot of individuals have repetitive behaviors, and that these repetitive behaviors are often things that, at least historically, we've tried to halt or change or modify to help them appear more typical in an environment, or to help them be able to engage. That it can be hard for us to understand how someone who is sitting there rocking back and forth can take in the literary assignment that we're trying to do, or how is it that they're learning to do their math skills right now when they're shaking back and forth. There's no way they're paying attention to me. And that's a reframing for us as support people that I think we can do, is consider that that actually might not be true, that maybe they're rocking back and forth, and maybe that's exactly how they understand this information. Maybe that's exactly what they need in that moment to decrease other input that's coming into them for them. They're rocking back and forth so they can focus on you instead of focusing on the kid sitting beside them that's chewing gum that's driving them crazy. So looking a little bit more, trying to do a little bit of reframing of some of those stereotypical or repetitive behaviors as strengths, and then how do we modify those behaviors, or how do we help them use those behaviors purposely and intentionally to change their energy level to meet where they need to be for different activities. Any questions on that stuff so far? All right. I know this is a lot of content, and I know that we're going pretty quickly. So thanks for bearing with us. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully it's helpful. Here's another great visual that I wanted to include because I think it gives some very specific, concrete things that you can do at home with no tools. So I think a lot of times what we hope for is that there is going to be a magic trick. We're going to be able to give you this specific sensory tool, this specific, pack of putty, whatever it might be, and it's gonna make you regulated and fix all your problems. But we just like wait and wait and wait and wait for these tools to come. What are we doing in the meantime, or what if that doesn't work? So this is different examples of power plays to use body movements to change energy levels. There are different modifications that can be done. You could, if you have an individual who's seated and doesn't do standing motions, maybe you're doing activities that are only upper body. Maybe you're doing activities that are arm-based motions, or pushing off against a table that's at their waist level instead of doing wall push-ups against a wall. Maybe you have an individual who has a different level of, that like their vestibular system is one of their big challenges. Like they get very, very dizzy easily, and that really sets them off. And so going and doing toe touches might not be the best idea for them. Like going up and down and changing that vestibular level over and over and over might not be the best idea. And so maybe you try something like the wall sits and doing some stepping or different motions. But these are just different general ideas with easy visuals for some of those gross motor, some of those big body movements that we can try to help change energy states at home. So what do we do next? We've tried these things, we've implemented these things, and we still have questions, or we're still really trying to figure out like what are the triggers, what are the things that are working in different sensory systems. What do we do next? So I think that the ability to identify someone's energy level can be really helpful. It can really help move forward in self-regulation. And the energy regulator tool can help break down these big feelings into relatable energy states. So as a support person, we're often tasked with helping an individual with an intellectual disability identify ways to change their energy states so that they can be ready for every task that they're going to be encountering. So the regulator is an additional tool from Autism Level Up that takes each sensory system, it breaks it down, and it offers a variety of suggestions for activities, actions, and tools that can be used to address the sensory needs in those areas. And within this chart, it also gives the ability to reflect on how that made me feel and whether or not it made a big change in the person's general affect. So it's particularly helpful when there can be some time devoted to it, and that time can be spent exploring these tools and strategies with the individual, and notes can be kept over time to determine what's working best for the individual. So this goes back very much to Jen's discussion earlier on about what are the specific sensory systems, and then how do we affect change and within specific systems. So I just put one example here from the whole tool, or two examples, I guess. We have vestibular and proprioceptive. So vestibular is that movement or position in space, knowing where your body is in space, knowing how you're moving. You want to jump up and down, or maybe you're going to touch your toes, or maybe you try and do some spinning and dancing to help change your activity level. So here's how it's changing my level, and this is how much I like it. So here, how it's changing my level is another place, Brittany, where you might do a lot of the note taking and a lot of the keeping track of changes you observe as a support person for an individual who's not able to communicate that with you directly. So this one I like because it can break it down. And you could say like it made a big change and then they seemed really unhappy, or it made a big change and they were doing great. They were so ready for their therapy session today. But I like this tool specifically just because it does give some really concrete examples of tips and tricks to try. And it gives a really nice basis for tracking that information if you are prepared, like if you're doing a one-on-one support or whatever it may be, if you're coaching or if you're providing direct services, this is a really good one to start documenting on. So it's a lot of information, it's a lot of different forms, a lot of pretty pictures, and a lot of me talking. We have a list of resources for you guys. The Autism Level Up website has a ton of free information, lots and lots of videos about the specific tools, even more tools and things to access. And then there's some other, obviously, citations in here, links to some of the resources we use to create this information for you all. And we will be sending it out as well. So I think we're ready. Any questions or comments? I know that was it's different for me to like be engaging in this way where I can't hear you all give me immediate feedback. So questions.
I think we were able to have some good discussion throughout the presentation, and you both explained things so well. Doesn't look like we're having any questions right now. Oh, I see someone, Kelly just said, do you guys find that different personalities have certain sensory types? Example she gave was INFJs may be seen as highly sensitive.
That's not anything I've ever spent time considering. I think it would be an interesting thing to try and observe. My immediate thought is that makes me think a lot more about like emotional sensitivities and sensitivity to feelings rather than sensory sensitivities. But I don't know. I don't have a good, my answer is I don't know.
And that is my answer as well. I've never even thought of connecting those two things. That would be interesting to look up. Mm-hmm.
Yes, this was very helpful. So before everyone hops off, can you go to the next slide, Lily?
Yep.
We do have 2 upcoming trainings coming in the coming month. So the February 26th, we have, we call it our Creative Start. You see, we like to use our agency name in our trainings. So we will have our therapeutic coaching team lead, as well as some of our coaches that Lily mentioned. We'll be providing some tips for keeping children with IDD engaged and active during COVID-19. So that will be on February 26th. And on March 26th, we have a presentation on PERMA, which is discussing incorporating positive psychology to increase well-being. So those links will be sent out to everyone who is on our distribution list and that's on this training today. As you see, you have my email address as well as our website for the Center for Start Services. So I'm going to share a brief poll right now. I see that we have 2 people on the phone. So if you give me 1 second, once I start the poll, I'm going to stop recording. And can you all give me, once I start recording, I'll let you know, and you all give me your email address so we can make sure that you all get a copy of this presentation as well. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today. And I will go ahead and launch the poll.